She didn't know that by opening that door, she would also be opening the past of a man who lied to everyone, including her. For 6 months, this woman lived alone in a mansion, fulfilling an absurd condition left by a millionaire in his will. But what seemed like just an inheritance was, in fact, a confession. She cared for him until the end. She loved him, believed in him, and forgave him. But when the will was read, the whole world turned against her. And what she found locked in that room changed everything. She cared for him until the end, but the will changed everything. But to understand what happened in that house, we need to go back to the beginning. The Montero mansion breathed more silence than air, as if the walls were afraid to make a sound. Clara adjusted the sheet over the old man's chest, feeling the cold skin yield beneath her fingers. The wall clock had been ticking the same way ever since the world began. From the garden came the smell of damp earth, a reminder of the morning rain. She whispered, "Thank you," unsure whether to thank him, God, or time. Alvaro Montero expired like someone blowing out a candle in the dark. Clara held his hand until the very last second, afraid to let go and discover the emptiness. There was no shouting, no speech, just a sigh that faded into the room. The switched-off monitor looked like a closed eye, finally at peace. In the hallway, hurried footsteps announced the arrival of the rest of the family. The door opened with a nervous click, and the first to enter was Ricardo. His red eyes betrayed a sleepless night. His wrinkled suit revealed his haste. "We arrived late," he said, as if someone were to blame. Behind him, Helena observed everything with a sharp, almost clinical calm. Clara, wiping her hands on her lab coat, nodded without a word. Dr. Augusto arrived with a brown briefcase pressed against his chest like a shield. He greeted everyone with the weight of formalities that protect against mourning. Their eyes met for a second that was far too long. There was a message there that he couldn't yet deliver. Perhaps it was just discomfort. Perhaps it was a secret. They removed the body with respectful gentleness, and the house seemed to shrink. The old portraits accompanied the procession, their eyes fixed on the living. Clara sat down in the armchair and noticed the cup of coffee was still warm. He took a sip and felt the bitter taste scratch his throat. It was the bitter taste of farewells that words fail to express. The large room was prepared for the short vigil. A wreath of flowers brought too much fragrance to quell so much sadness. Helena organized the details with almost cold competence. Ricardo was constantly on the phone, resolving things that nobody understood. Clara collected gloves, gauze, souvenirs that weren't hers. "Did you take care of him until the end?" Helena asked, without affection or offense. "Until the end," Clara replied, tying her hair back with a tired elastic band. "My grandfather trusted strangers too much," the granddaughter concluded, as if testing reactions. Clara held his gaze as if holding a glass that might fall. Dr. Augusto cleared his throat, cutting the wire of the voltage. "We will read the will tomorrow at 10 o'clock, the lawyer announced. "Everything according to Mr. Alvaro's wishes, in writing and recorded." Ricardo smiled briefly, as if he already knew the script. Helena simply nodded, a hint of irony in the corner of her mouth. Clara felt a chill run up her spine, without knowing why. As evening fell, the temperature in the mansion changed. The wind passed through the cracks like an ancient visitor. Clara walked down the hallway and stopped in front of a locked door. The opaque lock seemed like a blind eye watching over her doubts. On the other side, there was too much silence for it to be just silence. She returned to the empty room and picked up the neatly folded blanket. Folding, aligning, ordering. Small gestures to resist chaos. Your cell phone vibrated with an unknown message. "Take care of what you inherited." Clara frowned. She didn't know what they were talking about. There was no inheritance yet, only absence. In the kitchen, she prepared tea for trembling hands without asking permission. The kettle whistled like an intimate alarm, awakening memories. She thought about her parents, the rent, the night shifts. She thought of Alvaro calling her girl in a Sunday voice. And he thought about tomorrow, which was already arriving heavy and full of secrets. Before going to sleep, he passed by the locked door again. He pressed his ear to it and heard only the blood on his own body. Perhaps it was imagination, perhaps a distant piano note. Perhaps the house breathed as the living breathe. Clara turned off the lights and let the night take care of whatever was its own. The living room was rearranged for the occasion, with chairs arranged in a semicircle. The antique chandelier cast a tired sheen on the polished surfaces. Helena arrived punctually, elegant as someone who knows her place. Ricardo arrived late, his distinctive cologne masking his anxiety. Clara sat at the back, tried to disappear into the upholstery. Dr. Augusto opened the folder and took out envelopes with red stamps. His tone sought neutrality, like a metronome that doesn't go out of tune. Final statements by Alvaro Montero, drawn up in a notary's office. The paper crackled like firewood on a low flame. The family leaned forward in a choreographed gesture of anticipation. The first lines were acknowledgments and minor legacies. Paintings for a museum, donations for a discreet institution. Watches, rare books, a ring that has spanned 3 generations. Clara listened with the interest of a stranger. Nothing there was about her. The lawyer finally cleaned his glasses, hesitated, and continued. Regarding the total assets, movable and immovable property, accounts, and companies, I declare my wish that it be entirely bequeathed to Clara Mendez. The silence that followed was not human. It was architectural. It seemed as if the house had bitten its own tongue. Clara felt the ground just beneath her feet. Is this a joke? Ricardo stood up, breaking through the veneer of grief. My grandfather wouldn't do something so crazy. He was confused. Helena didn't speak. She cataloged her emotions like someone listing expenses. Her eyes rested on Clara as if she were assessing the value of a vase. Dr. Augusto raised his hand, asking for an order that would not come. Everything was confirmed by capacity tests and records. Mr. Alvaro was aware of his decisions, and there was no coercion. Clara thought about saying that she didn't want to, that she couldn't, that it was too much. But the voice refused to come out, locked in a place without a key. The lawyer wasn't finished. There was more to be said. There is a condition attached to the testamentary disposition. Clara must reside in the mansion for 6 consecutive months. And during that period, you will not be able to open the north rear room. Failure to comply will render the main provision null and void. The words fell like stones into a very still lake. Helena leaned forward, finally interested. The back north room. He brought up again, she murmured. Ricardo laughed awkwardly, a sound that seemed out of place in the room. Look at that. Even superstitions have gained legal status. Dr. Augusto kept the papers, as if he were breaking a spell. I don't know what to say, Clara managed, her mouth dry. There's no need to say anything now, the lawyer replied, cordially intensely. You just need to decide whether you accept the terms and conditions in writing. Helena crossed her legs and snapped. Accept it. Show who you really are. Ricardo growled. She'll accept anything for money. The air became thick, a curtain that prevented the light from passing through. Clara remembered the overdue rent, the missed shift, the bills. He remembered Alvaro's hand squeezing his, asking him to stay. I accept, she said, surprised at her own voice. No one applauded. The clock resumed its controlled time. After the signatures were obtained, the lawyer asked for a private conversation. In the hallway, the old would absorb confidences without surprise. Clara, if anything bothers you, call me anytime, he whispered. There are things about this house that don't make it into the court records. She wanted to ask which ones, but the question got lost in the next step. Outside, reporters waited like birds on wires. Microphones appeared. Lights came on. Sharp questions were asked. Did you manipulate Mr. Alvaro? Are you going to evict the family? Clara turned away, her chest pounding against the world. Helena passed by her like a perfume that doesn't ask permission. On the way back, Clara took the garden route. The abandoned flower beds were begging for hands and time, 2 rare commodities. As he bent down to pull weeds, something glistened in the soil. It was a medallion with a picture of a woman with a sad look in her eyes. On the back, an inscription, "Forgive me, a..." She closed her hand over the medallion and felt an ancient weight. In his mind, the locked door traced an invisible map. The mansion now seemed like a labyrinth with a forbidden center. The wind blew from the far north, lifting leaves like curtains. And Clara understood that the inheritance had, in fact, only just begun. The first night as mistress of the mansion arrived like a faceless visitor. Clara walked through the corridors with a flashlight, testing old light switches. Each click seemed to stir up decades of dust and a lexicon of echoes. The portraits gazed sternly, like judges in gilded frames. The silence was broken only by the sound of her heart beating outside her chest. In the kitchen, she separated the dishes, labeled the drawers, and put away the silverware. Organizing was his way of taming nameless monsters. He found a towel embroidered with the initials LM and froze it. The medallion in his pocket seemed to heat up as if in response. She washed her hands slowly, trying to wash away the questions as well. In the office, the smell of old tobacco clung to the curtains. A silent record player waited for a record that no one was playing. Clara ran her fingers along the spines of law books and memoirs. Some had pencil notes, nervous scribbles from another era. She mentally noted, "Catalog everything, then breathe." The north end corridor was a funnel of shadows and wood. The rug, worn in the center, showed footsteps going back and forth. The forbidden door finally appeared, a mouth sealed for decades. The oval lock had scratches, as if it were crying for help. Clara pressed her forehead against the wood and felt an ancient chill. She didn't have the key, and that should have been enough to deter her courage. But curiosity has its own anatomy, without bones and without limits. She promised herself not to try anything that day, or the next. Even so, he noted, ask Augusto about the key. Walking back down the hallway, he heard the sound of a distant piano. In the guest room, she spread out the sheets and opened the windows. The garden, seen from above, looked like a labyrinth waiting for Ariadne. A bird landed on the windowsill and watched her boldly. Clara laughed to herself, for the first time since reading. "I am not your enemy," she said to the wind, without any proof. The cell phone vibrated with 2 anonymous messages in quick succession. The house chooses its owners. Don't betray the last request. She replied, "Who are you?" and received silence in response. He put the device away and tried to line up his thoughts like silverware. Some thoughts, however, refused to obey. In the early morning, a crackling sound ran through the wood like a thin lightning bolt. Clara sat up in bed, her eyes bright, her breath short. Another piano note, a single, precise one, came and then cut off. It sounded like it was playing from inside the wall, not from an instrument. She whispered, "I'm not going to open it," for anyone who wanted to hear. Back at the office, a pale envelope demanded attention. No return address, no stamp, just the name Clara written in pencil. Inside, a note, "If you hear the piano, pray before you go to sleep." And a tiny brass key with no guarantee of future use. She closed her hand over the metal and felt the night grow larger. When the blue morning light dabbed on the curtains, she gave in. He kept the key in a medicine box, as if it were a chemical hazard. He brewed coffee, inhaled the aroma, and mustered his courage with a single sip. He opened the notebook. Day 1, complete 6 months. Do not open a room. Below the sentence, he wrote, "But why?" In the mirror, his face looked like someone who had only been told half the story. She adjusted her hair and fastened her lab coat out of habit, not necessity. "I take care of what needs taking care of," he said to his reflection, firmly. The house, somehow, seemed to accommodate itself to that sentence. And the clock, punctual as ever, gave him back the minutes to continue. At the downtown bakery, the doorbell announced each arrival. Clara entered trying to appear invisible, but invisibility came at a high price. The newspapers displayed a photo of her leaving the mansion with her lawyer. The headline reads, "Nurse inherits empire and fulfills fear clause." The warm bread failed to thaw the curious gazes of those onlookers. The shop assistant, kind by profession, weighed her words carefully like fruit. "My condolences, Mrs. Clara, and congratulations, I suppose." Clara smiled frugally, accepting both halves of the world. He paid, kept the change, and retreated to his own side of the riverbank. Nearby, 2 men whispered manipulation without hiding their erections. On the main street, market signs contrasted sharply with the latest gossip. A woman held Clara's arm for 1 second longer. He was a good man, He just needed company, she said and left. A boy filmed with a cell phone, without permission or shame. Clara realized that, for the city, she was walking news. In Dr. Augusto's office, the clock showed polite delays. He greeted her with lukewarm coffee and the look of someone who hadn't slept much. "I came to ask about keys," she said, direct as a scalpel. "I don't have any for that room," he replied, too calmly. "And I advise you not to try to open it, for your own peace of mind." "Is it superstition?" she insisted, unafraid of sounding skeptical. "It's history," he replied, choosing a word that carries weight. Things that become legend because they don't fit in the official records. Clara sensed the truth unfolding behind the curtains. "If something happens, call me before calling the press." On the way back, she stopped at the market to buy what she needed. Helena stood there, in front of the wine shelf, impeccably dressed. "I see that you are adapting to our city," he said, without using the plural form for inclusion. "To my house," Clara corrected, without raising her voice. The two smiled politely, sharpening invisible knives. "There are rooms that no one should open," Helena commented casually. "There are truths that no one should hide," Clara replied. The exchange was a quick game of chess, each piece occupying its square. Helena tilted her head, assessing the chessboard. "We'll see each other soon, nurse," and he left with curt steps. As she was leaving, Clara found a note attached to the car's windshield wiper. 6 months go by fast when you're scared, the fine print read. She took a deep breath, counted to 4, and repeated it until she calmed down. Cowardice is noisy, he thought. Courage often whispers. He put the ticket in his pocket and drove back into the maze. In the afternoon, reporters surrounded the gate with questions like thorns. "Are you afraid of the curse of the room? Will the family sue you?" Clara said no comment and closed the gate with firm hands. In the garden, the plants seemed taller, like green sentinels. She decided to replant the main flower bed, starting from the roots. While digging, the shovel struck something that was neither a rock nor a root, a rusty metal case, the size of a shy book. Inside, a roll of tape and a label, August 1985. Clara's heart beat beyond her own body. From somewhere deep in the north came the memory of a piano note. She took the case to the office and carefully closed the curtains. The tape was intact, but the dust seemed to have kept secrets. He placed a medallion on the table to the side, as if introducing old friends. The label trembled in her hands. Or perhaps it was she who trembled. She wrote in her notebook, "Tape, play, when you're ready." As evening fell, the city quieted down, but the house gained ears. Clara realized that the worst judgment didn't come from outside. It stemmed from that closed door and what it signified. "I keep my promises," he said, to the most populated void in the world. And he swore that, as long as he could, he would not turn the brass key. The sun rose reluctantly, and the mansion seemed to have awakened in mourning. Clara made strong coffee, tried to dissolve the weight of the previous night. The medallion still rested on the table, now next to the old ribbon. She thought about turning on the recorder, but the fear of what she would hear froze her fingers. The house, motionless, seemed to observe his hesitation with a certain irony. When she went to the gate to get the newspaper, her blood ran cold. A black envelope was tucked under the lock, unmarked, with no name on it. Inside, a single typed sheet. "You don't deserve what you inherited." The letters, all in capital letters, sounded like they were being shouted by someone in a rage. Clara looked around, but the street was empty. Only the wind answered. Back in the countryside, the landline rang with a sudden jolt. "Mrs. Mendez?" The male voice sounded low, controlled. "Who's speaking?" Silence, a breath, and the click of someone hanging up. Clara kept the headphones on, listening to her own heart. On the paper, he wrote, "Anonymous call, 8:47 a.m. At noon, Ricardo appeared unannounced, surrounded by arrogance and expensive cologne. "I came to get what belongs to my family," he said, walking through the gate as if he owned it. "You can't come in," Clara replied, with a mixture of firmness and fear. "I can go where my blood runs down the walls," he retorted. Before she could react, the lawyer appeared at the entrance, punctual as a form of defense. Dr. Augusto tried to mediate, but Ricardo played with anger and desperation. That woman has bewitched the old man. The cry echoed across the balcony. Enough! The lawyer ordered with weary authority. Ricardo approached, finger pointed, spitting out promises of revenge. When he left behind the smell of gasoline and burnt pride. Helena called in the afternoon, her voice polished and her venom dripping with liquid. He's impulsive, forgive him, she began, too sweet to be sincere. But the will, you know it's a fake, don't you? Clara hung up without answering, and the silence on the other end was almost a relief. The peace, however, was short-lived. Footsteps echoed upstairs. He climbed cautiously, holding his cell phone as a flashlight and shield. Each step demanded a test of his courage. The hallway was empty, but the open window allowed the curtains to dance. On the floor, a note was held in place by a nail. He lied to you. Clara felt the air thinning, and her premonition turned into certainty. Night fell, and exhaustion kept sleep away. She put the tape in the old recorder and pressed play. Hissing sounds filled the air, followed by a deep, trembling voice. It was Alvaro, confessing something about correcting the past before it's too late. The tape stopped abruptly with a snap. Someone had cut the end. From the hallway came the sound of shuffling footsteps. She turned everything off and stood motionless, her heart pounding. The medallion vibrated in his hand, or perhaps it was his own pulse. A sharp knock echoed on the bedroom door, once, twice, 3 times, and a male voice whispering said, "You shouldn't have listened." Clara woke up with the tired face of someone who had struggled with dreams. The coffee cooled before she realized she was holding it. The tape was still in the recorder. The final sound cut off in a dirty silence. She thought about showing it to the lawyer, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was fear, perhaps the instinct that the truth would not bring peace. In the kitchen, the phone rang again. Same time, same silence. "You heard, didn't you?" The voice was hoarse, broken, almost familiar. "Who is it?" Silence. Then a low laugh like iron scratching glass. Clara hung up and leaned against the counter, her stomach churning. The screen showed no registered calls, as if the phone had never rang. Determined, she went to Alvaro's office. He rummaged through drawers, folders, and yellowed envelopes. Among tax papers and medical notes, he found a notebook. On the cover, the name Lucia Montero, the same initials as the embroidered towel. The pages spoke of a truth hidden in the forbidden room. She tried to open the door one more time, just to test the old key. The iron rotated half a centimeter, enough to promise something. A scraping metal sound echoed inside, like trap breath. Clara recoiled, frightened, but unable to move away completely. The air around felt colder, almost dense, as if the house were holding its breath. Late in the afternoon, she called Dr. Augusto to talk. He listened to everything with the studied calmness of someone hiding secrets. "I don't advise you to keep messing with that, Clara. So you know what's in that room. Let's say that Mr. Alvaro believed that some mistake should die with him." Clara insisted. "And Lucia? Who is she?" The lawyer looked away, pretending to tidy up papers. "A former employee. The house has ghosts, and some of them still sign documents." Clara felt the name resonate within her, like an inherited memory. "She didn't rest," he whispered, and Dr. Augusto paled slightly. "That night, it rained heavily. The sound of the raindrops hitting the roof resembled distant applause. With each clap of thunder, the chandelier trembled and the main painting swayed slightly. Beneath it, the same spot where he had found the tape case. Clara knelt down, feeling her way along the floor, and felt a trapdoor hidden under the rug. His heart raced. There were more secrets beneath his feet than upstairs. Upon opening the trapdoor, he found a wooden box wrapped in old fabric. Inside, photos of a woman identical to the one on the medallion, smiling next to Alvaro. In one of them, a baby in arms, the familiar eyes, almost Helena's own. Behind the photos, an unfinished letter, signed with a trembling handwriting. "Forgive me, Lucia." Clara understood, for the first time, that the inheritance was merely a disguise for forgiveness. The wind pushed the windows open, scattering papers all over the floor. Clara knelt down, gathering the photos, her heart torn between anger and compassion. The tape, the diary in the room, everything seemed to point to the same thing. She looked at the ceiling and whispered, "I'm going to open that door, even if the world falls apart." And for the first time, the house responded, a deep sound similar to a piano being tuned. The invitation arrived in an elegant white envelope with no return address. "Reconciliation lunch, Montero family," it said, with a time and place specified. Clara hesitated, but her nurse's instinct prevailed. Confront, not run away. She dressed soberly, her hair tied back, and her heart filled with fear. Before leaving, he ran his hand over the medallion, as if seeking a blessing. The restaurant was expensive, quiet, and made for those who conduct business over glasses of wine. Helena awaited her with a porcelain smile, while Ricardo's anger was barely concealed. Dr. Augusto was present, but he seemed uncomfortable, an out-of-place figure. "It's so good you came, Clara," said Helena, stirring the wine as if plotting a spell. "We have family matters to resolve." "Family?" she retorted calmly. "I don't remember being adopted." Ricardo slammed his hand on the table impatiently, the glass trembling between his fingers. "Enough of the pretense. What do you want in order to give up the inheritance?" "My peace," she replied without blinking. "But you don't have any to sell." The waiter discreetly moved away, as if sensing a storm. Helena rested her chin on her hand and smiled, as if appreciating the chaos. "You have no idea what you've inherited, do you?" she asked softly. Clara kept her gaze fixed, giving no pleasure to the possibility of doubt. Helena then leaned forward, whispering, "The same guilt that killed my grandfather." Ricardo huffed, throwing his napkin onto his plate. "Enough of the charade." Dr. Augusto intervened in an authoritative tone. "Mrs. Clara is not obliged to listen to insults, and this conversation ends here." But Helena held his wrist firmly. "You're also to blame, Doctor." The silence stretched like a rope about to snap. Clara stood up. "Thank you for lunch. It served to remind me who I'm dealing with." Ricardo stood up too, his eyes flashing. "Don't think you'll get away with it. I'll prove you tricked him." "Prove it," Clara replied and left, letting his anger echo among the silverware. As she left, the warm afternoon wind seemed to push her back towards the mansion, but the feeling of being watched followed her all the way to the gate. In the rear-view mirror, a black car was silently following her. When he got home, he noticed that Alvaro's bedroom window was open. He ran up, his heart racing, his mind on high alert. On the table, a photo of her at the restaurant, printed and fresh. On the back, a phrase in red ink. "It's not all his fault." She looked at the locked door and understood. The secret awaited her, impatiently. The following morning, the sun streamed through the stained glass like colorful sheets of fabric. Clara walked to the main hall, where Alvaro's portrait dominated the wall. The painted eyes seemed to follow her, attentive, inquisitive, too alive. For a moment, he had the impression that the painting was pulsating. He approached, and the sound of creaking would fill the air. Behind the frame, something clicked, a hidden compartment, concealed for years. Clara, with trembling hands, pulled back the panel and found a ribbon and a letter. The handwriting was Alvaro's. "If you are reading this, it's because the truth has found its way." On the paper, a stain of old wine almost resembled a tear. She took a deep breath and began to read, while the tape played in the recorder. "Lucia didn't deserve what happened. I destroyed 2 lives out of fear of scandal." Alvaro's voice trembled, a belated confession from a man who had never been forgiven. "She was the only one who loved me without wanting my money, and I buried her in silence." The sound of the piano in the background accompanied the words like a lament. "If anyone hears this, make sure her daughter knows who it is." Clara froze. The pieces finally fell into place. Lucia, the woman with the medallion, the embroidered initial, the forgotten employee, and the daughter could be her or someone too close. He looked at the portrait and, for the first time, saw guilt in the painted features. The painting seemed to raise questions she didn't want to answer. He decided to seek legal counsel, But first, he needed to document the evidence. As she was taking notes, she heard footsteps in the hallway, light like those of a child. "Dr. Augusto," he called, but the sound stopped abruptly. Suddenly, the portrait fell off the wall with a thud. Behind him, another hidden space, smaller, but large enough to hold a revelation. Inside, an envelope with the same handwriting. For Clara, when she finds out. She sat on the floor, her heart pounding, and opened her mouth. "You were not chosen by chance. Your name is no coincidence." The letters seemed to vibrate in the dim light. "You are what remains of my mistake, and the key to forgiveness." The tears came uninvited, heavy and old. Her name, repeated so many times, now sounded different. Clara Montero, the surname she never knew she carried. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was blood, it was shame, it was destiny. And for the first time, the locked room seemed to call her by name. Night fell like a heavy cloak over the Montero mansion. Clara paced in circles down the hallway, the ticket in one hand and the key in the other. The words echoed like an ancient oath. "You are what's left of my mistake." The silence was so thick that the sound of their own footsteps seemed to scream. Standing before the forbidden door, she felt her heart pounding in her throat. The brass key trembled between his fingers, hesitant like forgiveness. The metal spun with resistance, as if the lock had a will of its own. A sharp click broke the decades-long spell. The door swung open with a long groan. The smell of mold and dormant memories filled the air. The room revealed a frozen time. Covered furniture, intact curtains, dust as dense as ancient snow. In the corner, a grand piano rested beneath a yellowed sheet. Clara discovered it, revealing stained keys, some still vibrating on their own. On the piano, a framed photo of Lucia and a smiling girl. The child was wearing a dress with the same lace as the embroidered towel. On the floor, a diary lay open, as if waiting to be read. She knelt down, her hands dusty, her heart torn between fear and reverence. The pages spoke of love and shame, of the pain of being erased for convenience. Alvaro promised he would tell everything. He said that one day he would forgive me. Clara swallowed hard. The following lines were blurred by old tears. And finally, a highlighted phrase, "The girl will know, even if the world denies her name." The lights flickered, and the wind swept through the hallway like a voice. "Clara." The sound was clear, feminine, sweet, and sad. She turned her head, but there was no one there. The mirror at the back reflected the entire room, except for her. For a moment, he believed he had ceased to exist within his own home. She ran outside, slamming the door shut, but the echo of the voice followed her. "You know who it is, my daughter." A whisper diluted in the wind. Clara fell to her knees, her tears mingling with the dust of history. The inheritance, now, was a scar inherited by mistake and fate. And on the floor, the key gleamed again, cold but alive. Dawn brought a cold light, as if the sun itself had doubts. Clara, exhausted, sat down in Alvaro's office with the diary in her hands. Each word seemed to weigh tons: guilt, love, regret. She finally understood the reason for the will. The old man had tried to fix the past, but there was something else, something he was still hiding. Determined, she went to the office safe. Among the papers, he found a folder marked with the name LM. Inside, birth certificates, records, and a photo of the grown-up girl. The features were familiar, the eyes unmistakable. It was Helena, the legitimate granddaughter, the illegitimate daughter. Clara took a deep breath, the shock coursing through every nerve. Helena, the woman who despised her, was the missing link in the story. But why then did the will leave everything to Clara? The following pages explained. The inheritance belongs to Helena, but only Clara can decide to hand it over. She shares the same blood. The old man had constructed his own penance. Before he could react, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed on the stairs. Helena entered the office breathless, with a piercing look in her eyes. "You read it, didn't you?" he asked, his voice broken between hatred and fear. Clara didn't answer. She just handed over the diary. "You need to know who you are, Helena." Helena picked up the diary, leafed through it, and turned pale. "My mother He lied his whole life. The tears came like lightning, quick, inevitable. And you? She asked, looking at Clara. What is your role in all this? I am the mistake he tried to correct, and the bridge he left between you. A loud bang interrupted the moment. The sound of glass breaking upstairs. Ricardo had returned. You will not destroy our family name, he shouted, bursting in violently. Helena placed herself between him and Clara, protecting her for the first time. This family has already destroyed itself. Ricardo. The confrontation was inevitable. Past versus present, blood versus truth. The diary fell to the floor, its pages scattering like feathers. Ricardo tried to take the documents, but Clara stopped him. During the struggle, the 1985 tape fell out of Clara's pocket and broke in two, and the piano up there played a mournful note all by itself. Helena picked up the folder and held it tightly. I'm going to take this to the police. The will, the story, everything. Clara nodded, exhausted but at peace. Do what he didn't have the courage to do. And for the first time, the name Montero sounded like liberation, not a curse. The clock in the room showed 9 o'clock at night, but time seemed to have stood still. Helena and Clara, side by side for the first time without masks, were reviewing the documents. The diary, the tapes, the letter, everything pointed to a bigger secret. A missing daughter. But the last record, dated 1986, offered a confusing clue. She was taken. Look for her in Santa Clara. They'll know who she is. St. Clair? Helena murmured, confused. Perhaps an orphanage or a convent, Clara replied, intently. On the old city map, a point marked to the north revealed a forgotten place. The name sounded ironic, St. Clair, the same name that life had given to the one who tried to unearth the sin of another. They decided to go in the morning, but they knew they weren't alone. As they turned off the lights, a headlight came on the road in front of the mansion. A black car, the same one that had followed her days before, watched in silence. He knows, said Helena, her insides freezing. Then you'll have to hear the truth along with us, Clara replied firmly. At 3 a.m, Clara woke up to the sound of footsteps downstairs. She descended slowly, barefoot, her cell phone in hand as a flashlight. In the kitchen, he found the back gate ajar and mud stains on the floor. On the table, someone had left a medallion. Clean, gleaming, open. Inside, the photo of the smiling woman now had something new, a tear at eye level. The fear was physical, a weight that pushed the air out of the lungs. Clara ran to the office and locked the door, her hands trembling. He picked up the phone, dialed a lawyer's number. No answer. On the answering machine, there was only a constant noise like breathing. From the other side, a voice whispered, "You've gone too far." In the morning, Helena appeared with a pale face and swollen eyes. "He was here," he said, without needing to specify who. Clara showed the medallion. Helena cried when she recognized it. "He belonged to my mother. I saw him when I was a child." And at that moment, they understood that the line between love and guilt had disappeared. With what courage they had left, they drove to the abandoned orphanage of Santa Clara. The gate, covered in ivy, creaked like a rusty throat. Inside, moldy filing boxes held stories that no one wanted to remember. Among the papers, a card, child left unnamed 1985, mother Lucia Montero, and at the bottom, an illegible signature that, when illuminated, revealed itself to be Alvaro Montero. Helena broke down, the pent-up tears finally bursting forth. He hid his own daughter here. He let me grow up in the dark. Clara hugged her, without answers, only truth. Now you have the choice he never had. Forgive or continue the cycle. But the noise of an engine outside broke the truce. Ricardo had followed them. The gate was violently broken open, and the echoes reverberated through the orphanage corridors. Ricardo burst in shouting, his face contorted, his eyes gleaming with fury and fear. "You will not tarnish the Montero name. This dies here with me." Clara instinctively pushed Helena back, out of protectiveness. "It doesn't have to be this way, Ricardo. Nobody wants to destroy anything, just tell the truth." "Really?" He laughed. a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "You don't understand. My father killed that woman, and now you want me to pay." The words cut through the air like a razor. Helena, trembling, took a step back, but anger overcame fear. "He killed for you, to preserve a name you're now trying to save." The silence that followed was more dangerous than any scream. Ricardo raised his arm, his hand trembling, an old revolver pointed at the two women. "I don't want to hurt anyone, but nobody is taking anything away from here." Clara stepped forward calmly, like someone facing death with dignity. "You've already taken everything you had to lose, Ricardo. All that's left are lies, and you—" The man hesitated, his finger on the trigger, wavering between hatred and guilt. Helena moved too quickly, pushing Clara aside. The gunshot rang out, shattering the old glass behind them. The smoke from the gunshot mingled with the dust of the past, which was finally being set free. Ricardo fell to his knees, his face contorted in tears, the revolver falling to the ground. Clara held him by the shoulders as he murmured, collapsing. "He told me to hide the body. I just obeyed. I was just a boy." Helena looked at her brother as one might gaze into the mirror of her own pain. And that was the legacy he left us, guilt and silence. The orphanage, an old witness, seemed to sigh, an end foretold decades ago. The police arrived minutes later, alerted by the sound of the gunshot. Dr. Augusto came along, his face aged overnight. Everything was recorded, reported, delivered. The truth, finally, written down. Clara watched as Ricardo's body was carried away, without anger or relief. "He only continued what his father started," she murmured sadly. Back at the mansion, the piano played alone, a final song for a buried past. Helena walked over to him and ran her fingers across the keys. "My mother used to play this to help me fall asleep," she said, through tears. Clara placed her hand over hers. "Then let her sleep now in peace." And together, they played the last note needed for silence to return. The following morning dawned with the sound of sirens and murmurs. The press circled the Montero mansion like vultures around a secret. Clara watched from the window, her gaze steady and weary. Helena, beside her, held the diary like a sacred weapon. "It's time to stop hiding," she said without hesitation. In the main room, Dr. Augusto had gathered journalists and officials. The flashes exploded like thunder, recording the end of a legend. Helena began to read Alvaro's letter, her voice firm, without tears. "My name is Alvaro Montero, and this is my sin." Each word revealed decades of guilt and silence. The revelation was devastating. The murder of Lucia, the hidden daughter, the manipulated inheritance. The journalists frantically took notes, the public mesmerized by the posthumous confession. Ricardo was identified as an accomplice in the cover-up, but his death sealed the deal. Helena cried between sentences, and Clara tenderly supported her shoulder. The scandal gripped the country. The Montero empire crumbled on national television. In the afternoon, the authorities sealed the safe and locked the house. "It's symbolic," said one of the officers, closing what was open too wide. Dr. Augusto signed the documents with trembling hands, his face pale with redemption. Clara watched silently as Alvaro's portrait was removed from the wall. "Let the weight go with him," she whispered softly. When everyone had left, only the two women and the piano remained. Helena sat on the bench, playing slow, uncertain notes. "Do you believe in forgiveness, Clara?" he asked, without looking at her. "I believe it starts when we stop hiding it," he replied. And for the first time, they both smiled, not with joy, but with peace. Weeks later, the Montero mansion was just a memory among luxurious ruins. The inheritance was suspended, and the accounts were frozen by the courts. Helena cooperated with the investigations, facing her past with dignity. Clara, in turn, visited the Santa Clara orphanage every afternoon. The walls still held echoes of laughter and faded sorrows. On a gray morning, the judge signed the final order. Alvaro Montero's entire inheritance was transferred to his legitimate daughter, Helena Montero. But upon receiving the papers, Helena made an unexpected decision. "I want to donate half to the orphanage," she announced, her voice breaking. May other children have the future that my mother did not have. Clara watched everything from a distance, sensing that the cycle was finally breaking. She refused any financial compensation, claiming she was not entitled to it. I received more than I expected. The truth, he told the press. He opened a small retirement home on the outskirts of the city. He called her Lucia's house, in homage to the woman whom everyone tried to erase. The news spread, the nurse who inherited millions and chose to care. But Clara didn't want fame. She wanted silence. On the walls of the new home, photos of smiling elderly people replaced the stern portraits. Each face was a story without a will, but full of value. The antique piano, restored, now played for those who still awaited company. Helena would visit occasionally, discreetly, with flowers and anonymous donations. He left us ruins, but also the chance to rebuild, he said. Clara agreed, her calm gaze that of someone who finally understands time. Ruins are only the beginning of something more solid, she replied tenderly. And so, the Montero name began to be cleared, note by note. Months later, on a drizzly afternoon, a letter arrived with no return address. The old envelope bore only the inscription, "For Clara, who never left." Inside, a silver key and a note with Alvaro Montero's unmistakable handwriting. You open what you needed to, but there's still a room that holds the rest of me. When you're ready, come home. Clara read the words silently, her heart still, caught between past and present. She looked out the window of Casa Lucia, where elderly people smiled to the sound of the piano. The peace she felt was real, but the curiosity eternal. On the horizon, the outline of the old mansion emerged from the mist. Some rooms only open when the fear dies, she told herself. At the end of the workday, he walked to the gate with the letter in his pocket. The cold wind carried the scent of wet earth and unfinished memories. She stopped, looked back, and saw Helena waving from the window with a slight smile. Clara returned the gesture and left, her step firm, her gaze calm. The key gleamed in her hand, inviting her to return to the point where it all began. Upon arriving at the mansion, the gate creaked open as if recognizing an old love. The house seemed smaller, less threatening, almost human. He climbed the stairs, the planks creaking under the weight of history. He stopped in front of a door he had never noticed before, the last room. The sound of piano music filled the air, soft, welcoming, like a reunion. She fitted the key into place, the cold metal against her warm skin. The door opened effortlessly, revealing a simple, clean, and well-lit room. On the table, a photograph of her and Alvaro, together, smiling. On the back, a handwritten phrase, "Now, yes, we are at peace." Clara smiled, tears streaming freely, and whispered, "Finally, Grandpa." The sound of the piano stopped. The light streamed through the window and illuminated her face as a farewell. The mansion finally breathed a sigh of relief, as if revealing a secret kept for generations. Clara closed the door slowly, the key still in her hand. And outside, the rain stopped, as if time had finally learned to rest. Stories like this remind us that the past never sleeps. It just waits to be heard. And if you've made it this far, it's because you also believe that some truths are worth the time to be told. So stick around with us. Subscribe to the channel to keep following stories that touch, surprise, and make you think. Leave a like. It shows that spending this time together was worthwhile. And if you want to continue with the same energy, the next video is waiting for you right here. Trust me, this story will stay in your head for a long time too.